Guatemala, Ecuador.
Right, yes,
That's
right.
okay. Yeah, don't worry. Well, here's everything centered in teachers explaining and talking a lot. Students are not allowed to talk to each other. That's not something good in classes. And the idea basically is them for listening and listening, whatever the teacher is talking and talking and talking. And it's really, when we are talking about, that's how every class will look like. It's not only math, but when we're talking about math, then is everything really procedimental in algorithms and memorizing everything. So that's, I think, what will resume everything about our classes, or most of our classes, because we're trying to improve. And I cannot say this is everything in Ecuador, but most of our schools how it happens.
Bueno, Alex, tú.
Sí, dale.
Sí, ok. Entonces, una clase típica aquí en Guatemala, creo que generalmente depende mucho de dónde estemos, ¿verdad? Porque yo podría hablar como de lo típico que hemos visto nosotros aquí en Zacatepeques.
So Fatima is going to talk about like a typical class that exists in Zacatepeques, which is like the area around where we live, because there's a lot of variation and it depends on where you are in the country.
Pero lo más típico de otros lugares o lo que se ha visto es como, ok, maestro enfrente, dando instrucciones, alumnos como veo, copio, trabajo, no dialogo con mis demás compañeros, sino que es como trabajo muy tuyo, nada más individual.
So typically the teacher would be in front of the class, and if I'm the student, I'm just looking, copying, writing things down, but not talking much to my classmates, and just doing what I'm told to do.
Y también como no hay como una confianza entre alumno y maestro, sino es como, ay, no me va a regañar, mejor no digo nada o algo así.
And there's like no trust between the students and the teachers, because it's better to just not say anything so that you don't get in trouble, because as a student, you feel like you're going to get in trouble if you ask a question or say anything.
Excellent. Thank you, Fatima.
Can I add something just really
yes,
small?
You certainly, yes.
When I want to imagine a class here, I will say that individual seats, places, and tables are often used. So the way we are even make students to sit down is not letting them to talk, because have you seen those chairs where they are include their table, and if you want to do something different, like join getting together 3 or more children, you can't, because the table does not allow you. That's how a normal class would look like here.
Interesting. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I have a kind of a follow-up question to that for Pau and Fatima and Alex.
Wait, can we hear from Crystal first really quickly, Callie, because before we get to the follow-up?
All I was going to say is it's not very different here in the States. So yeah, I was going to agree that when you were talking, and I understood more of the Spanish than I thought I would, so I'm feeling pretty good tonight. Nice. But it's, you'll see the same. I mean, again, it may not be across the board, but you see a lot of that here, students sitting, listening, receiving. Mm-hmm. That's all I can say, Callie.
Okay, I was just gonna ask if Pau and Alex or Fatima could share a little bit about if there are schools in your area that tend to display more of the practices of effective teaching that we've been talking about. Who goes to those schools? Where are they, and who has access to the schools that do display principles of effective teaching?
Nice setup. As we set up of equity. But go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great question. I can say, for example, my kids' schools are not like that, but I have to pay a lot for them to be there, and the difference really huge. There's not, or I can say that there's not a single school that will be not paid like a public school that will have that won't include if it's public. So the ones that can have access to those principles and actually great effective teaching have to pay, and they has to be people that can afford that.
Mhm. Yeah. How about you, Alex? Was that the same in Guatemala? The private schools have,
Yeah.
if there is training for teachers?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple exceptions, right? As like in general, yes, that's definitely the case. Like across the country, there's a couple like NGO schools or things that are like you have to go through an application process or something like that to get into the school. Like maybe it isn't something that your parents are paying for, but it's something that it's like you've had to apply to get into the program, where the teachers do like look like the students that they're working with, right? Like thinking of, there's a school that's called Maya, for example, that the idea is that the teachers have had like a very similar experience as the girls that they're teaching with. It's an all-girls school, and they're Indigenous, and so it's like there's a very specific profile for the girls that are coming into the school. But that's like there's examples, but they're like few and far between, I would say. So in general, yes, it's definitely that it's completely based on what your socioeconomic status is, and that's it. And nobody attends the public schools if they have any other option.
Right. And those private schools that you were talking about are often ones that we've worked with and sort of helped transform the teaching. A big difference, though, that I notice as an outsider and as an academic is on the one hand, well, the teachers in Guatemala and Ecuador have weaker content knowledge, Crystal, much weaker. And often they're following the book because that's the only way they understand a concept, even as simple as adding 3-digit numbers. So you have to do it exactly according to the book, because I don't know if it's right any other way. And then the other thing is the teachers they feel more willing to make a difference, a change in their classroom, because they're teaching a lot at home. You know, they're teaching kids how to weave and how to cook and how to farm. And they don't ever lecture. I mean, you imagine a mom going, okay, diagram an egg 10 times, you know, and if you get the correct on the test, then maybe I'll let you. She's like, let's just cook. Let's cook, damn it. I think that'd be a great textbook for a book. Let's just cook. So that's a difference. And I think that gives us a lot of opportunity to make a difference. And we're seeing that. So let's dig in. So, and since we're talking about sort of equity and injustice and social justice and stuff, I wonder what the distinction between those three terms are. And the book, The Principles of Action, doesn't even talk about social justice. So let's, first of all, tell me what you guys think of as the difference between equality and equity. And Crystal, check it out. And then I want to know, Crystal, from you, why not social justice? Why wasn't it included in here? And you think that's something that would be if it were written today? So anyone, can you tell me what equity and equality means to you? Any of you four? And Suhaila, feel free to jump in on this too. You have a good perspective.
Okay, well, I can just start us off. I know that it's like won't be an all-be-all answer, but the way that I would say that the book sets it up is that when we're talking about equality, it's like same thing for everybody, regardless of background, language, culture, context, anything else. It's just everyone the exact same, in that equity takes into consideration those other factors in order to try to like achieve something that is more, I guess, like distributed across, like that is more equal for more people, but it's the equity piece is like trying to accommodate for the different needs or things that somebody might be bringing into the classroom if it was a math class situation.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense to me. Anyone else have anything that you want to add?
I really like the picture you sent us because it gives us a great representation of what it could be. So I just, in my notes when I was writing, I was thinking on equality as equal tools and assistance that would let you not always to have equal opportunities to everyone. So you're given the same tools, but does not mean that we will have the same opportunities. And when we're talking about equity, then we can talk about custom tools that will address inequality, but it still will fix the problem. We are talking with a problem that we need to be fixed. And when we're talking about justice, it's not about fixing a problem, it's talking about working with a system. So we are offering also great tools and custom tools that will let us or let students have access to the same opportunities. So that's for me what I wrote in.
I like that a lot. Yeah, Callie.
I noticed a lot and and have been thinking a lot about, inputs versus outcomes, and what are we paying attention to, and but also, if we want students to have access to the same high quality outcomes, who decides what a high quality outcome is?
Oh.
And then that's where you're getting into justice. Who decides and why? And is that what students and communities want? Do they want it because that's the only thing they know could be available? Do they want it because someone else told them that? Is it because they, haven't seen anything else? Do they have the tools necessary to be able to make informed decisions for their own lives? And who decides the content of what the options even are?
Yeah, to
That's
build on
Crystal.
that, when I was looking at the picture with the apples, I'm like, who gets this? What if apples don't work for someone? So we're giving them access to the same thing, but what if what if someone is allergic to apples? That can take their life. So it's like, who decides what's on the tree? Or do we need not have a tree at all? You can just pick from multiple whatever. But that is a note I made. I was like, I love that I love the picture you put here. And at the same time, I'm like, yeah, we're still having them go for apples.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's humbling because I think I'm all really woke with this as a white man, but I didn't even think about that. Who chooses? To me, the well, on the one hand, we don't even have. Hello, Naomi. By the way, Naomi's in Chapel
sorry,
Hill.
I'm late.
No, it's great to have you join us. To me, to stop for a second and say, in a lot of schools, and what I heard from Pao and Fatima is, we don't even have equality, the most minimum thing in a lot of schools in Guatemala. The wealthy schools have more resources, more access to resources, more attempts to meet the needs where they are. So, if we have an unequal world, we have equality going into the system and unequal outcomes. We don't even have that. So the extremes, it makes it even more extreme. We're trying to balance it. To me, then the inputs are, if we can make those equal, that's equality. If we can help equalize the outputs, that's maybe equity. And then changing the machine is, what Crystal's talking about. Who's to say what that machine looks like? That's something. Yeah. Huh. Well, that's a good setting the stage. So we all sort of feel like we have this idea. So this book describes, equity and access as an essential element, but then makes a distinction between that and the teaching practice as a non-negotiable core. Can you guys describe what that means to me? That was really nuanced. And I even wonder how that translated to Spanish for Fatima. Any thoughts on that?
Well, translation is actually the same.
It
So
is.
when we're
Okay.
talking about essential, we're talking about esenciales. And when we're talking about non-negotiable, will be exactly the same. No negociables. So will be the same. But what was new for me, I had to look for a little bit deeper so I can
Google lo
understand
tradujo
that.
así también. Sí.
Got it. Same. Got it. It's the same. Yeah. What's the distinction between the two, and how can you get by without it, with one or the other? What did that statement say to you guys?
I tried to look a little bit deeper, as I told you. And well, I tried to describe it with my own words. And when I look for essential, then it was kind of an absolutely necessary, something that's extremely important. And when we're talking about something non-negotiable, has to be means something about discussion and modification. So it needs, when we're talking about non-negotiable, then is something that is not open to discussion. So are different things, because the first one is like the essence.
Oh, interesting.
That cannot happen without that, because it's the essence of everything. And when we're talking about non-negotiable, it means there's something we have to discuss or not.
I like that. So, Crystal, do you want to add something? Do you have something? Can you help us with this? Talk us through this a little bit?
No, I was giving that some more thought as you all were talking. So I'm just, continue to think about this difference between a non. I mean, I made some notes, but I'm looking back at my notes to say, well,
yeah, Paula did it. I think Paula's answer was that was really thought-provoking to me. Because what you're saying is, look, we know someone needs to breathe oxygen. And if it's not oxygen, it can't happen. Now, what other kinds of things must be there for there to be success? But if you don't have oxygen, it's not even good. So basically what I hear you saying is, unless you're using teaching best practices, then we're not going to expect kids to learn at all. Now, how can we help them succeed in their learning? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and some, I don't know if you all read Danny Martin's response to principled actions a while ago.
Yeah,
and
I did.
also,
Yeah.
and Robert Berry, the former president of NCTM, recently did a session called "Are the Mathematical Practices?" I don't know if it's dangerous for Black learners, and so he talked about how some of these practices can cause harm. So, so I think it's thinking about, so these things are maybe, like you said, if they're essential, and if you don't have them, you're not going to have good mathematics teaching. Then we have to think about, okay, is that true for everyone? And one thing that Robert pointed out was when we talk about, constructing arguments and critiquing, that as a Black learner, if I am questioning the teacher, it can be taken as me misbehaving and that not being honored. And I don't know if that happens where you all are, where some students, even in their actions and questions, can be taken as misbehavior versus I'm really trying to understand what you're teaching me. I'm not questioning you. And I was thinking about that when you were all talking about the fact that some students don't even speak in class because they don't want to get in trouble. So if you have this practice that we're supposed to, create these arguments and construct these arguments, well, unless, again, you got to change the system, because if I, as a student, am critiquing or questioning my teacher, I'm going to be punished for that, when really I'm trying to understand mathematically what's going on. So I think it goes back to what you were saying, Chad, is the machine. We have to change the system for these things to work, because these very practices can be harmful when they weren't created. The intent wasn't for them to be harmful.
Yes. So what would be if I'm teaching a group of Black students, then does that mean I have to give them space to develop the trust that Powell was talking about? Or does that mean I sort of disregard that practice?
No, I think it's a matter of you being able to see a Black body as not being threatened. And am I questioning you? So my work is around Black girls. And research shows that Black girls are penalized for the same behaviors that white girls are given credit for, because it speaks to leadership. So I think it's you as an educator having to deal with your own individual biases and racist views. And all of us can be racist based on the Kendi book that is out there. So you're supporting those policies. So I think that as a teacher, you have to understand this is not a student attacking me. It's a student trying to further their understanding. So I think you have to have space to allow them to share their thinking and to critique their thinking, but they can't be penalized for that. And some people see it as a threat when certain people speak to them, or if they speak in a certain tone, even though they're not trying to be disrespectful with their tone. It's just, like I tell people, my family, when we get together, we can sometimes have a very hard tone with each other, but that's just how we've communicated since I've been able to communicate on this earth. So I'm not being disrespectful. It's just how I talk at times. And so I think it's, as a teacher, realizing that we have our own biases and not allowing that to kind of, I can't think of the best word right now, just kind of make cloud what the students are really trying to do, which is to learn.
Yeah. Kelly, go ahead. Go ahead.
I cannot come off of a video for some reason. It's freezing and acting a little wild. But one of the things that I just wanted to know was that is what you're describing, a symptom of the adultification of young Black girls?
Yes, I mean, part of it, absolutely. Part of it is the adultification, and just, them not being seen as brilliant individuals. But yes, absolutely, that adultification plays into it. And therefore, even when they make mistakes, they're not given that sympathy or the issue. And I don't know if you all see this. Can you go over that again? I'm a student asking that question, and the response is, no, you should have been paying attention. I just went over it. Mm-hmm. They get no sympathy. They get no second chances. I did it. You should have been paying attention. But at the same time, you can watch the same teacher respond to a white student in a totally different way.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So, yes.
Callie.
Yes.
I think about it extending out of the classroom, the potential harms as well, because not only do I need to be aware of how I might respond to my students engaging in these practices, but also I might need to be aware of how my students engaging in these practices outside of the classroom could impact their experience in the world as well, with things like pushing and asking questions and concepts of authority and collaboration and all of this. And then also like be cognizant of that, but also not have it as an excuse to take away a strong learning opportunity from my students. So this, like here in Ecuador, thought about it with the Girls STEM Club and asking questions and sharing your ideas, and even, for our girls with perfect attendance, they got a journal that was like for rebel girls. And we had to have a conversation with the teachers to make sure that that was going to be okay. And then also talk to each individual parent of the girls who got that book, and thinking like, let's talk about what does it mean to be a rebel? We're saying that these are the things that a rebel girl does. She believes in who she is and stands up for what she thinks and says no to things. But in the recognizing that in the community, that could get a girl in a lot of trouble and could cause problems for her and her family. And so, it also, there has to be a level of consciousness there, and students are also aware of their realities. And so like we can have that conversation with students, and, if they're resistant to something because they're like, wait a minute, no, the world tells me that I can't do this. Well, I can recognize that, and I can see that, and I can tell you that in this space you can. And let's talk about what it might look like in other spaces, or just like building that trusting relationship so that any of my students can see me as the teacher as an ally, but also like I'm doing as much as I can to promote their flourishing without causing harm. Does that make sense? That was like kind of went in a lot of different directions.
Wow. Yeah. You guys are really impressing me. That's a really powerful thing. So Crystal, we have in Ecuador, we started a Girl STEM Club last year. And I'll just quickly, like the plan was to work with the teachers, 2 teachers in the school, and this was an after school program to give the teachers the freedom to try different things in the classroom. And really it was Callie coordinated it last year in Ecuador, and we had a huge response. A lot of the girls participated, were excited about participating, and a lot of the journey was helping them feel self-confident in the classroom, and also for the teachers to see that when you teach differently, it's transformative. And we saw an impact in the way they taught in regular school day. But I think that's something I never thought about is, what happens if we have seen this in Guatemala, haven't we, guys, where especially at Maya, I remember hearing that some of the girls go home and sort of speak for themselves, which is maybe not an ideal thing. Was that what you guys see? And how do you balance the role of culture in, because it seems to me like it's sort of a machismo world still. How do you balance that?
Yeah, I mean, in fact, like with the school that I was describing earlier, which is one that we've worked with for, I think Teacher T has worked with Maya for like 4 years now. But yeah, I mean, those things, it's not just something that is like school versus home, it's something that you are bringing home too. If you're bringing in like these ideas that are seen as very radical to the community that you're working in. And so like Callie was saying, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's like all good or all accepted or all the parents are on board with it. It's like they're excited about the education of their daughters, but also what that means in terms of how they might act differently at home, or how now they're not going to be seen as like attractive for a husband because the husband isn't receiving maybe the same sort of like education around what is, I mean, even talking about like what the role of the woman is in the family, or how she should behave outside of the home or in the home, etc. And so yeah, I mean, I think it's something that maybe when we think about education, that's not always what comes to mind, but those are things that for sure are affected by the like what's happening in the classroom as well, right? So yeah, I think we've definitely seen here that it isn't just like, oh, that's so great and we love that our daughters are going to be educated, and like yes at first, but then the reality of that hits and it's like, oh, I'm not sure that this is actually what we signed up for, right? So that's what we would see at the all-girls school that we work with, where they are promoting girls in leadership positions and taking more initiative, and like Callie said, like speaking out and things. So yeah, that's not a given.
No.
I had a thought from including classmates and teachers, because I grew up and it was taught and rammed into us, you were supposed to question, you were supposed to have these discussions. And it wasn't until I started moving through the world outside the bubble where I grew up that not every culture is going to be like that. And it took me wanting to understand, whereas some kids, to have that discussion within the classroom, that not all cultures are inherently having the same conversations once they leave the classroom, like Callie said, where it would be helpful. And I'm going to ask my two kids, do you understand maybe the way they interact with their classmates, because they both have very diverse classrooms, that they may not even be aware of what's happening. So involving all the kids and the teachers into understanding where somebody else is speaking from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting dynamic because, you want to honor the cultures of your student. It's, and that difference doesn't somehow mean that it's wrong in some way. And so I think it is important, as you were saying, Naomi, to include the teacher, the student, and think about how to include the family. So when you say you got a girls STEM program, like, yeah, I got one too. So we need to connect our scholars in some way. But we really work with the parents as well. And like I said, I'm here in the States. So, making sure that, I'm not trying to impose anything of my culture on them, but just let them know, here are the reasons we're going through these practices, and here's why we believe it's important. It's not to disrespect the culture, it's not to make your daughter less of a suitable mate, but it's to help to enhance her mathematical understanding, and how and get feedback from the parents. I mean, they might have some, it might be getting parents in these types of spaces to sort of talk about, here is why we're doing what we're doing. Is not meant to disrespect the culture they're in, but help us to bridge this gap. Because I don't have the answer to, that happened. One of my girls, she was in this girl STEM program, was very confident. Next thing she know, she cut all her hair off. Her mom was like, what is going on? So she just started, exhibiting this leadership. I'm taking control, and it didn't cause problems, but her mom was kind of like, okay, now, I understand you're confident, but we want to make sure you don't get a little too out of line. But it was just having those conversations with the parents as well. So I think it'll be wonderful to think about how to include the parents, especially if you can't do it in the formal school space, to include them in that informal space with that program or other programs.
Yeah, I love that. Because imagine, you can use what's going on in our country. If a kid were in my classroom, she or he would be taught to think about the science and ask those hard questions. Does that really make sense? Well, what about all these other examples? And that could get someone in trouble in some of the very conservative homes in our country now. Heck, it's got me in trouble when I talk to my family about this even still. So that's a local example, and I know it's happened in Guatemala and Ecuador quite a lot. Even in La Puerta Abierta, some of our third graders we do a math night when we have teachers come. And the kids at the school are doing math that the parents don't quite even understand at the elementary level. And that's really powerful. But unless we have that relationship with the parents so that they trust what we're talking with them about, that could be a challenge. I think you really do a good job of talking about why that's the case.
I am thinking also sorry, can I?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you got your mute off first, so you get the.
Yeah, sorry. I was thinking also in teachers, what happened with them when we are working with them reminds me when we were working with teachers at the Galapagos, and we were with the math teachers, and they've been working with us for 2 years, and once one of them told me that I'm so happy here. I feel trust and we can talk because we've been working for 2 years with you. And every time we come here, I can say whatever I think. But the problem is when I have to go back to my class or to my school, actually, when I want students to talk, then the other teachers think I'm not working at all because they are talking, not me. And that's not what is used to happen. So I'm also thinking what happened with the teachers that are not as the system and they are trying to do something different. And I remember also an example that's also cultural when I was talking about the building trust with the students and trying to having this conversation with the students. And one of them told me, well, I can actually get too close to my students, especially if they are girls. It was a teacher, a boy teacher that was talking with a man, and he said because it will be taken as a sexual harassment, so I have to be really careful. I cannot be close to my students, and just thinking how this system how we can work with the schools and with the teachers that want to change with the whole system is not changed yet. So just throwing some thoughts.
I think that speaks to why it's not just about teachers. Like our work focuses on teachers, but if we really want to advance towards our mission of, quality education programs through partnerships that advance or that lead to greater social justice, we can't do that in isolation with just teachers. We have to include all stakeholders, which include parents, students themselves, community leaders, administrators. There's so much more. While the bulk of our work can be with just teachers, if we're working with teachers isolated, we won't be able to move towards justice.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You guys are,
and
yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Sorry, there's one other point that this reminded me of that we've talked about, and I think in another learning lab, but and it's like, it's one of those that I think that as like an international organization who has like our main experts coming from the United States and kind of bringing this text also here, we also get into this complicated thing of like, okay, now we're saying that these things are better than what you already have. Like it's sort of like this colonial mindset in itself of like, this is how education should be. And like, it works for us in the United States and we're going to try to change how things are when in Guatemala and Ecuador, because like we know best. And I think that always is complicated as well, because as much as like we think we're well-intentioned, there's plenty of examples of like well-intentioned people coming to help and like it having a really detrimental effect. And we talk about it a lot when we like when we're thinking about like how is this gonna be culturally appropriate when we're developing a workshop, or if we're talking about the way, even the example I think that Crystal used before, where it's like you're saying that you should be questioning something, but maybe that like culturally and societally isn't like appropriate. So now you're creating like you're acting like it's a good thing to do and like promoting that, but then the outside world maybe isn't. So I think, I don't know, it's like a complicated thing, because obviously we have like the good intentions and we think that we're doing this, but I think there is always sort of this possibility of like, well, we're assuming that this is better like than what the current system is here based on our perception that's like, and we're like kind of colonizing the education in that way, but like teaching local leadership and stuff. So I don't know, it's like,
So the classic dilemma. Yeah.
Yes, it's like a ongoing thing. Like, how do we actually know, and how do we make sure that we truly are being like culturally like appropriate, and like trying to take into consideration what is valued within the system that you're already at, but also you're promoting these new things and new ideas that challenge the way things are. Like, is that okay? Like, I don't know. It's just a whole.
Well, can I phrase a question that I've been thinking about in that frame, and being the white man here, of course, I am the one who's right. You guys all know that's a joke. But the question really is, I believe that this sort of traditional model of teaching is one of the artifacts of colonialism that is not left. Because when I see, when we do a day in the life almost everywhere, I see teaching happening all the time that's different. And, it's the students asking questions, but the culture has become traditional, sort of Eurocentric in the classroom. So on the one hand, we're trying to say, honor what you know. Here's a way that can happen. But then the question I would have, maybe for you all and for Crystal is, well, what if the culture doesn't fit with the best practices? Do we say, here's another way to try and see if you could weave this into your knowledge, or do we dismiss it? What if cooperative learning is not something that is widely accepted in the culture then? How do we approach that?
I think it goes back to what Callie was saying. It's bringing, like, even before going in, even before saying we're going to do this, whatever this is, it's having conversations with the stakeholders. I don't know, how, if they're community councils, to talk about here are the goals we want to, well, it might just be going to say, what do you all need? I'm about to say, come up with the goals. Sometimes just sitting down to say, we're focusing on mathematical understanding. What do you all need? What things do you feel are going well? What would you like to see done differently? Because even when you talked about the teachers teaching them how to do things around the house, and you were talking about cooking eggs or weaving, they're doing math all day, every day. Yes. So these kids are being able to exhibit mathematical knowledge in their home life. So it would probably be having those conversations with all stakeholders to say, here's the mission of our organization, but we're here to serve you. And what would this look like working with you? And what would it look like within your culture? And sometimes you go to places, you go in different cultures, and you're like, man, that practice just doesn't seem right. And at the same time, it's not for us to try to write that in that time. It's just to work to understand. And sometimes it can be very difficult when you have young people coming to you, not comfortable with some things, and trying to help them trouble through that. But I would go back to say is having conversations with all the stakeholders involved, like not going in with here's what we want to do because we believe it's going to work, but what do you need in your space? How we can come alongside you to provide that support. And of course, you all have all the expertise with the practices and all of those things, but bringing the community together. And so you can have a better eye for when you might run into those disconnects. Because I think you can change things. Like I truly believe that you can repackage things and shift things to get to the goal. I mean, yeah, you have this goal, there can be different ways to get there, which may look a little different than what NCTM, because think about NCTM, they just celebrated 100 years. And when I think about Black kids, well, how much has really changed in 100 years since NCTM has been existing? So even though these are practices that we can see some growth from, it's been 100 years and we're still having some of the same conversations. So, and part of that, I'm sure, is, having in mind what one thinks is right and not having those conversations with the stakeholders. So was there a community council before these books were printed? Were teachers, students, and not just your high achievers, but all students included in that? So I'm working with a district now, they're having issues with algebra. And I'm like, I want to talk to the 40% that aren't passing. Like, have you asked them why they are struggling, why there's the disconnect, and start from there to see what can be done differently.
I love the idea of listening first. Go ahead, Callie.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking about the difference in, like, are we coming to say this is what math teaching should look like, or are we coming to work together with communities to construct that for themselves? Like, even when you look at the T2T principles of effective teaching, which are really similar to the ones from this book, they're really open. Like, focus on important content, ensure equitable engagement. when we think about student representations and student thinking, there is not a specific strategy in any of that. And so what that can actually look like we don't decide that. We can have our ideas of strategies, but that is not for us. And so if we're coming into a community or into a PD session thinking like, I am the holder of knowledge and I am bringing it to you to be able to learn this knowledge, then we're not in the right lane. And so this is where the constructivist pedagogy comes from. And like, we're working with what you've got and you're going to build it. And these are, like, we say that our principles of effective teaching can transcend cultures and contexts because they don't have to look the exact same, and they shouldn't look the exact same in, a school in Weldon, North Carolina versus Onsale, Ecuador versus at Lago Atitlan in Guatemala. Like, you can have those principles that look different, but that still lead students to success and to mathematical success and opportunities in a way that is meaningful for them and for their communities. We're not the ones who define and determine that.
Yeah. Wow. Well said, Callie.
Yeah, and it made me think back to your example when you were saying that a teacher sticks to the book because it's easier to do. It's easier to go in with the strategies laid out, because what Callie's talking about, that really, really is hard work that stretches all of us beyond our comfort zones. Fatima, I'm sorry, please.
Yeah, go ahead, Fatima. Yes. You're on mute.
Sí, iba a decir que respecto a lo que estaba diciendo Cali, que más o menos entendí, es como lejos de que sea solo como estrategias, hablando en matemática, te va a ayudar como para todo. Y es como me he dado cuenta muchas veces que es como lo que estás utilizando, no lo vas a usar solo como en la clase de matemática, sino que es como general, te ayuda en todo y en muchas otras cosas, y más aquí por cultura. Y lo siento por la música de fondo.
So Fatima's just saying that she realized too that the things like the strategies that you are learning and using in the math class are things that also apply and that you can use outside of the math class. And so it's not just in that space with math, but also things that you can bring to your real world context. And sorry for the music in the background.
Yes.
No te preocupes, Fátima. No tienes que
vecinos.
preocuparte la música, ni tu hija, ni nada así. Que sea bienvenida en este espacio.
Ok, gracias. Sí, solo como aporte es como, creo que aquí en Guatemala te ayuda bastante eso, porque te rompe hasta cierto punto el modo de que has venido siendo educado, de siempre como guardarte y no preguntar y no saber por qué. Es como, te ayuda un montón en ver como detrás de todo lo que te están diciendo y tener una respuesta del por qué. ¿Por qué esto? ¿O por qué necesitamos esto? ¿Por qué me estás diciendo esto?
So it helps a lot, especially in Guatemala, to ask more of these questions of like, why is this happening? What's the why behind something, to help you understand the root of what's going on behind whatever it is that someone might tell you.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And Naomi, I want to get to you in a second, but let me just say this really quickly. One of the real focus, both sides, for teachers to teachers, is to have local experts. And that's why it's so important that Pao and Fatima are able to be a part of this, to take this on and sort of mull it in the context of their culture, what part of your culture that you are expert with. But then what you are doing with the local teachers is the key next step, right? Because you could say, here's what we're thinking about it. You have discussions about what works, what doesn't work, and then they can take it to the community. I think that's really, really key. Naomi, yes.
Something that just synthesized in my head and clicked hearing everybody is when I was in the classroom, you looked at different learners understand information in different ways. Everybody can see one thing, the same thing, and then interpret it in different ways. And when you're working with communities and families and educators and administrators, each community is going to interpret and understand things differently. So a way to approach is just that you would approach different individuals as learners. There are different communities that shift and morph in different ways, and to address that.
Right. So this is where Suhaila comes in, because it sounds to me like this is really expensive. And Crystal, I know you know this too. In the U.S., the amount of money we spend on teacher training and on education is crazy. You'd think that we were by far the best performing country in the world, because it's just so much money that goes into it. And we're not even close to equity or social justice. So how do you balance the cost for this? When I and probably Suhaila, when we talk to donors, they go like Gates. They want, okay, that's great that you're doing this for 500 or 1,000 teachers or students. I want to know how to do this for 1 million. What I hear here is this is individual, and it's knowing, and it's expensive. Is that right? Do we just accept it? What are your thoughts? And everyone, I'd love to hear everyone's ideas.
Well, sure. I get, even in the States, I get that from some funders. They want me to have a broader reach, like, bring in hundreds and thousands of girls. And I'm like, no, I want to go deep with the 45, 50 that I have right now. And so I have to find funding sources to do that. And one thing here, is, I leverage resources from parents, and it might not always be money. It's their expertise. If you can buy supplies, if you can provide food to help offset the cost. So I do believe that there are individual donors that can support this work. There's some foundations. It might not be the Gates type of money, but and at the same time, when I got feedback about, we want you to reach hundreds, and I gave the rationale of, think about the impact if I'm going deep with these 45, 50 girls in this cohort, and I'm following them throughout their academic career, to make that argument. And also thinking about how to leverage the resources for the family. I'm just somebody who but my work might look a little different. I don't want to let money stop me, even if I have to go smaller scale, because I truly believe if we can, even the work you all are doing, if you get one teacher who truly buys into it, who might get another one in the school, who then might eventually get to the administration, or you get to one administrator, we can just start with that one spark.
Well, what do you say to a school that, we say, like, I think, you may have read, and we could talk about it, but like some of the, what I call them, hold on, what's the phrase? The inputs that are different and unique for each student. Like one suggestion is to say, instead of having advanced algebra for the really another algebra, is to have a support class, or to let students come. That's cost. Are we going to ask teachers to do that? How do you manage that?
I think you can't. One thing we can't do is manage the commitment of the school. Like, if the school is truly committed and they're called on, like if you're truly committed, you're going to put the finances behind this. You can't be a school that say you're about equity and you're not willing to put the resources behind making that happen. And so I think it's really having to make sure that schools are clear on your goals. Like, if this is what you want for your students, then these are the things that has to happen, because it does cost. Like, to do those, the group I was talking to yesterday, their algebra class size has doubled. It didn't cut in half, it wasn't divided, it doubled. And so now they have a class that there were supposed to be students getting the same situation, 2 blocks, and they're not able to do that. Now, if they're getting 2 blocks, I do ask what's happening in that second block, because the 2 blocks are the same thing, but resources. And so my question to them, which then they can't control the budget, but if this district is really focused on truly equity and being an anti-racist district and issues of social justice, you have to put the financial supports, the human and the monetary capital behind it to do it.
That makes sense. And the connection from what the U.S. and the work what we're doing is, I would love to see us develop NCTM-like organizations in all the countries that we're working with. And Paul was working at University of San Francisco Quitos, has a strong relationship with the Ministry of Education. To me, it seems like that would be a good next step for NCTM, is to pull back from the classroom and start talking to politicians and government agencies. And that's sort of, if we can get them to take on these same values, that may change things. And would that be the case in Ecuador and Guatemala as well? I'm not sure. First of all, does that make sense to you, Crystal? Is that the right idea?
Oh yes, I think, and it, because I mean, even when you said, having like, organizations like NCTM, I don't know if NCTM, I know, is ICME a part of NCTM, the International Council of Mathematics Education?
No, not ICME, is it?
Not
NASTROM is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think ICME is. I don't know. That would be worth thinking about. They have their, there's pre-conferences next year, hopefully, now in China.
I wanted to add to, I wish I could see, you guys could see me when I say this, but it's been such a really powerful conversation. One of the things that I wanted to add was the relationship that we have with educators and the rest of the common community, right? One of the things that Callie was talking about previously was how there are so many other issues going on socially that by the time the students get to the classroom, certain expectations are that these educators are supposed to raise these young students into scholars. And what actually happens sometimes is that they leave the classroom and still have to deal with the normal social issues that everybody else has to deal with, right? And so it automatically brings me back to the visual of when every year when teachers put out that list of things that they need and they ask for support and they ask for help, that's where the responsibility lies for us as community partners, as donors. There's so much responsibility for us to uplift our teachers. And I've noticed that in certain like fundraising communications, when we ask for support for the teachers and make it very clear that they cannot do this by themselves, that's where the funding kind of hits, and people, it clicks for people that they do have a responsibility. And then one of the things I just wanted to say was that recognizing the power of community-centric fundraising and community-centric or community-focused giving is extremely important, because that example that we bring by showcasing, hey, this is what we did with 48 students in Quito, we can do this, we can multiply this and do this on a grand scheme, but we have to start here in this small area. We have to start here to make sure that we're creating a foundation that's palatable for the rest of the community, and that it is something that's supportive and helpful, and that we can replicate this.
Yeah, I hear you. Go ahead, Crystal.
Oh, I wasn't saying anything. I'm
Okay.
I'm typing you different questions in the chat box as they come to mind, so I don't have to take up airspace.
Oh, great. Okay.
I was thinking in a math way. So, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because when we're thinking in STEM Club, we're working with teachers, but we're also working with the students. But when we are working with teachers, we have to think that these teachers will have a lot of students every year. So we are multiplicating every effort we're doing. So that's something great about working with teachers. And yeah, because reminds me when I was working at the university, I had this kind of conversation once, and I was trying to really work deeply with teachers, and the university was hoping to have this master sessions with teachers, and I said no, that makes no sense, and they said, well, we'll have 200 to 300 teachers, and we will have more. And I told them more is not more deeply, it's just more people in maybe one session. Why don't we shift that and change maybe 40 teachers and working alone consistently every year? And they say, no, that's not something we are going to do that, because we won't be able to afford that, because we won't have some numbers. And they were talking about numbers, and I remember I had that conversation, and then when I left, they changed that again, and they're having this kind of huge group workshops, and that was the why. And yeah, that's one of the things I really love about our work in T2T.
It's focusing. It's to me, I always talk about creating a movement, and we're not going to maybe get 1,000 people initially, but it's starting small. And like, look, with the conference that we have next week, Alex, I'm not sure what the response has been online, but that started in 2014 with 30 teachers or 25 teachers who were dubious about, I'll spend a half a day with you guys, or a day. now it's 5 days long or 4 days long, and we had a waiting list of 200 last year. So that's creating the movement that we want, and working with the community. So I like that.
I was thinking on that in the model, in an exponential model versus a linear model, actually, when I was
Nice.
trying to explain that, because I told them this to the university, maybe it will take a while for us to get into these 40 teachers, and because they need to learn really step by step. But then these 40 teachers will have more, so we can think on that as an exponential model. And then versus linear, when we are just having 200 and 200 and 200 and 200 people, but won't make any changes, won't last. So we're talking about something right now, or something that will be sustainable and work over time.
Kyle, I think that's a really good point. And I'm gonna add something that a presenter actually asked us last week when they were doing the like pre-conference meetings. And one of the questions that they asked was, like, this is great. We've seen that you guys have a couple examples of teachers that have actually reached this point where they have gone through this whole cycle of like learning with T2T, applying what they've learned with T2T, and now leading other teachers in that process, right? But the question was, how do we have more teachers that are like that? What are we doing to have more teachers that aren't just at the conference, aren't just in this first phase, but like, how do we like take them through the whole cycle? And so it was actually a question that I had written down on the sheet, because with Celestine and Yolanda, who are examples that we always use, the partner was very involved in what Crystal mentioned before, right? With like, they monetarily have backed this curriculum, this vision for what teaching should look like, the way that the classrooms are set up, literally just things like having the desks like that can have 5 kids around it, right? Like things that are all conducive to what we're talking about. But that was like a massive move by the partner to make that happen, and T2T supported the teacher training side of it. So it makes me wonder also about in the reading when it talks about the non-negotiable cores and essential elements, how do we make teachers successful, fully go through this whole loop if the school, their administration or something that we're working with might not have all of those things in place, right? Like, how do we get teachers to that point? So that's something I wanted to just ask the group and just hear like what your thoughts are, because it's amazing to have all of those pieces, but the reality is that for most of the partners we work with, that is not the case. So like, what are your thoughts?
Good. So let me just rephrase what I'm hearing you say then is, we were successful. One reason we were so successful with Maya is because they bought in at the administrative level and supported us a lot. And I know, Crystal, we see this, right? In the work you're doing, I'm sure you have, sometimes you have administrative support, sometimes you don't. How are you successful when you don't have administrative support? And well, you're on mute still. Okay.
Yeah. So I think when you don't have administrative support, it can limit the impact. I mean, if the teacher has autonomy in his or her class, they can make impact on that level. But in order to make that systemic change, you have to get buy-in from administration. But that might come from you leveraging the parents, like being able to allow parents and caregivers and community members to say, if they agree, if that's something they want, then they can be the voice that goes to school administration and say, here's what we want, here's what we're pushing for, here's what we're gonna become activists for their students. So that can be one thing. If you don't have that administrative and it's not system-wide, you can have impact at the classroom level, but it can become very difficult, especially if there's certain like if teachers have to have, I don't know if in Guatemala, Ecuador, they have the teacher evaluation systems like they have in the States, but if there's certain standards that teachers have to meet and that's going against them, it could be problematic. So I would say teachers can so for me, I know I can make impact on a smaller level, and also leveraging community and parents to say, if this is what you want for your kids, and you're going to have to be the voice, you can be the voice that goes to administration. Especially, I think you share that you were mainly private. Do you say you were mainly private schools? Or public?
It's a mix, right? Yeah, we work with mix.
So I'm thinking, especially in the case where tuition dollars are being paid by your parents and community members, and so they have power, and whether they recognize it or not, they have a lot of negotiating power. So being able to leverage the community.
Yeah, mostly we're working, if we work at a private school, it's a very high needs,
Okay.
low resource with an NGO. But Callie, this makes me think a lot of how you did that groundwork before starting the Girls STEM Club. That really got that. Did you feel like that's something that and then I think I do want to move on. We have like 15 minutes or so, and I want to make sure there are a few questions because we're not talking a lot about the practice of this, but the big picture, which is critical because that's what we do anyway. So I'm really helpful. But Callie, tell us a little bit about, does this jive at all with what you did, the Girls STEM Club?
Yes. In thinking about that, before that program ever came to life, it started out as my idea, but then I took it to the administrator and shared with her everything I was thinking, got her feedback on it, turned it into a presentation for the teachers, shared with them my ideas, took their feedback into it, and all along each step, it influenced the design. So it started out as like, here's an outline of some things. Now, what should this actually look like when we do it together? Are you interested in it? Do you want to collaborate on this? What do you think about what's here? If we say we're gonna do math in the community, how do you see that? What does that mean? And so we did that with the administration, with all of the teachers from the school, with just the small group of teachers who committed to the project, and then in several parent circles, some at a school level during like open house at the beginning of the school year, and we're able to share the idea with all parents, and they were able to come and ask questions. And then once girls were signed up for the club, we did it again with the mothers in particular of the girls who were in the club, and so they were able to come and contribute and add their ideas, and then all of that impacted the actual design and of the program.
Nice. Yep. That makes sense. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. I think I'd like to give us, or maybe a little bit more, that gives us a little bit spillover. And this is a pretty rich, deep section. And I wonder what kinds of questions you have. There's a lot of stuff we didn't talk about. How do you handle a classroom with diverse learners? I know that's done to varying degrees of success in various places where we're working. That's one thing. Or what are some of the obstacles that you see? Can we do this if there's not a curriculum that supports it? These are questions that we could talk about any one of these, but do you have anything specifically that you guys really wanted to talk about from this section?
I have one question I would like to talk about growth mindset.
Okay.
That's something really makes me think that we want to build culturally relevant and significant lessons. We want to take in consideration what their cultural beliefs are, but we have to. What about this mindsets that does not let you grow? Because what I've also seen is that some of these thoughts are just not letting some teachers grow and think that it's culturally relevant, and it's not. It's just fixed mindset. I don't know how to explain that. How we can get into a balance where we can just not disrupt what they think, but also let them grow. Because I've heard a lot things like, oh, that's not work, just because it's not how it works. We shouldn't talk to each other because that's not how it works. And it's not about the cultural thing, it's about mindsets. So that's something I would like to hear about your thoughts.
Got it. I'm going to say the answer is C, but if Crystal has a better answer.
You can talk about answer C.
Yeah, thanks so much. See, this is why. No, I think one of the model that we have for the conferences, I think addresses that in some way. I really feel like, and Crystal, you've seen this firsthand. I mean, I learned to teach differently by experiencing it. And Carol Malloy, my advisor, was Crystal's advisor as well. And by experiencing it firsthand in her class, or by watching Susan Friel, who was also one of my advisors and wrote the Connected Math Project stuff, teach me. And it was, I had to experience that math could be different. So I had to, when I visit, you saw it, when I go to do a workshop, I say, here's this thing I did in my math class. I'd love to do it with you guys. Can we just check it out? And it helps them see beyond what was happening. And I'm constantly stepping in and out of my role as teacher trainer. And I'll say, well, here's what we're doing. And it gives teachers a chance to say, this would never work in my class. And then we can address it. And then we get right back to it. And I'll never forget working at a conference in Guatemala once, and I was doing something that was clearly above the heads of a particular group. They just were not engaging and they really weren't talking about it. So I changed the problem and I just said, okay, you're having a party for 10 people, plan it. And here are the things I want you to focus on. All of a sudden, they cleared the desks and started working on one whiteboard and were engaged in with this idea. And it helped me sell them on the idea of, did you learn something? And they go, yes, that's critical. And then you could say, well, here's what I did. Do you think that makes sense for your students? And I see pretty universal buy-in for that internationally. And I don't know if it's because I'm from the United States and they're just saying that, or they really believe it. But what do you think about that? Does that sort of answer it, Paul? And Crystal, yes. What
I was going to say is just as they're talking about in the reading, that we have to know that kids that they're not fixed, like they can grow, they can learn. It's the same thing for teachers. We have to know when we're working with teachers that they have space to grow, and it might not happen in one session, but they do have their fixed ideas. And it's what Chad is talking about, showing them that there are different ways that you can do things. So sometimes people just don't know what they don't know. And it's just giving them a different experience. And I'm like, oh, I can try to do this. And then building up their confidence. Somebody may, as an adult, for me, it's gotten a little easier to say, I don't know, I need help. But for some people, that can be tough to admit that, yeah, I buy into this, but I have no idea how to do this, and I'm going to need some help. So I think it's making sure that we look at teachers the same way we look at our learners. We have to give them access. We have to be equitable in how we treat them. We have to be just in how we treat them. And we have to look at the brilliance of teachers, even though their actions might not mirror it right then, but know that they have room to grow and they're not fixed in where they are.
Crystal, the one thing you said that I'd love to emphasize is this idea of radically accepting where they are. I was talking to an actor about the things that are connected, that great teachers can learn things from actors, great actors. And I want to write a book about that. But one of the things that this actor told me that was remarkable was every character thinks they're doing good. Even the evil guy goes, I'm doing this for a reason. That's a real legitimate reason. I'm just not going to mess things up. I want something good to happen for me, maybe. And so when he takes a role, he falls in love with that character and that behavior and what's going on. And I think he really works to radically accept it. And if we can pull away the judgment, I think that's a really important first step. And to radically accept where they are, one, because they know the situation that we don't, and then to move forward from there. I think that's something I think about.
Yeah, I think, as an organization, one of our key values is possibility, and we can bring that into spaces, and we also shouldn't expect that people are already also valuing possibility. Like maybe they are, but maybe they're not. And so maybe they're not yet. Maybe, we can bring that into a space and it can be infectious. And, two of my favorite questions are why not and what if? And I ask those questions a lot when I work with teachers. If they say this can't happen, well, why not? What if it could? Imagine what if? And, just giving people the space to be able to break outside of the box and think a little bit differently. I think that it can go a long way. And so much of it does come into, just because a it can be easy if I notice that a teacher has a fixed mindset, it could be easy then for me to fix my mindset about that person and say, well, they have a fixed mindset, so they're not going anywhere. Well, guess what I just did? I just totally cut the legs out from under the entire sense of possibility there. And so that's something that like I need to be cautious of for myself too. And like, what do I believe is possible for kids? What do I believe is possible for teachers? And how do I bring that into all of the spaces where I am?
Very good. I like that a lot. What other questions, you guys, from the reading that your thoughts that you had, or?
Okay, I have one that came up in the part about like equity and equality. And actually Fatima and I were talking about it a bit on outside of the reading, just in terms of like, how far do you go, or like where do you draw the line? I know there's not like a end all be all like sort of answer for it, but no sé, Fátima, si tú quieres como compartir el ejemplo que me estabas comentando antes. De como que cuando estamos hablando de como que hasta qué punto estamos acomodando a un alumno, unos alumnos, o sea, como que ¿dónde está esa línea?
Okay.
Fatima has an example that she brought up, so I think.
Okay.
Sí, había, o sea, un ejemplo de como hasta qué punto llegamos. Había un chico en determinado grado que por lo general tiraba todo, quebraba los lápices, se los tiraba al maestro, los encerraba dentro del salón de clases, no le importaba a quién como pateaba y quería pegarle a medio mundo, ¿verdad? Pero nunca escuchaban al maestro dentro del grado, sino que esto se dio, o sea, vieron que el niño era como muy arriesgado tenerlo con los demás niños, al momento que lastimó a la directora general, que ella es extranjera. Hasta ese punto fue como, ok, hay que hacer algo, pero nunca escucharon a la maestra en este caso.
Entonces, como que o sea, ¿cuáles preguntas tenías tú sobre esa situación que querías
Sí,
como?
o sea, era
hacer?
como, ok, ¿hasta qué punto aquí también cabe como no sé si sería como igualdad o equidad de este punto de cómo la administración también juega un papel importante dentro de este rol y ver, o sea, las oportunidades, ¿verdad? De por qué nunca, o sea, todo lo que está sucediendo dentro del salón muchas veces no se dan cuenta. Y es como vas a notarlo hasta el momento de que por qué no escuchas a tu maestro, sino que hasta que le pase a alguien más que está arriba tuyo. Es como hasta qué punto vas a venir también y tu maestro vas a como acomodar al niño o a pasarle todo porque te están dando esa orden de, ok, hay que tenerlo acá. Él es de muy escasos recursos y hay que apoyarlo en todo momento, pero es como, sí, te entiendo que eres de muy escasos recursos, pero ¿hasta qué punto podría ser?
Okay, so the question goes to like, up to what point is like trying to create a situation that provides like equity for a student that you're working with. And so in the context that Fatima is describing, she worked in a school that was a NGO school, so like a nonprofit school that's like funded by like a foundation outside of Guatemala. And so the students that are at the school are really low resource, and the approach of the school is to do everything possible to try to like support these kids to have like an educational experience that's going to be a high quality educational experience that's going to be really trying to like accommodate the needs or accommodate things that might be happening so that they have access to what we're talking about in this reading. But in Fatima's experience, the student like would throw things across the classroom, would kick everything he could, had like a lot of just I guess like expression of like anger. And there was like, one time when we were in a workshop, he like threw a chair across the room kind of thing. So it's like, yes, there's other things that are going on. But Fatima's question when she was reading this was like, okay, up to what point do you like accommodate? And like, what's sort of the role of the administration in that process? Because as a teacher, you might do everything that you can to try to make the learning fit with the student or fit for the student. But at what point is it like, okay, this is beyond like what you can do to try to make it work for a student?
Right. What's that? What is too many accommodations, or how do you find that balance, Crystal?
Well, no, one kind of my thing is if it becomes a student being harmful to his or herself and someone else, and they may have to be temporarily removed from the situation, to find out what's going on. Because as you say, clearly there's something else going on with this student, and to make things accessible for him is getting him whatever helps he needs, which that might be some type of mental health support. It may be some other things going on, talking to a counselor. So there's some things for me that I know may be beyond my control. And so I may have to call in help with that particular student. So it's not, I really have to deal with the root of what's going on instead of trying to appease and deal with the fruit, which is him acting out. So something like that for me is if it gets to the point where they're being harmful to themselves or harmful to other students, it's not that I'm throwing in a towel indefinitely. It's just right now we have to get you some other supports, because learning can't happen with someone throwing items across the room. And whether you have the rapport of that student to kind of talk with them, or in that moment they have to be somewhere else and then you come back together. But there has to be a line at some point. And it can be hard to do that, because I'm one, when I was a teacher, I'm one who didn't want to send kids out of the room. But when it came to physical harm in any way, I had no other option at the time. Or I'll have a student come to class under the influence of drugs. I can't let them sit there under the influence. Now, I didn't want to send them to the police. I had a trusted administrator that I can call on, or we had a counselor where I could send that student. It wasn't going to send him into the system. It was making sure that student got the support, and that student ended up needing Alcohol Anonymous. So he ended up needing some support for alcoholism. So I didn't want him penalized. I wanted him to get that support, but it was beyond there was nothing I could do in that Algebra 2 class to support him in what he was going through, except be a supportive teacher and give him the help that he needs. So I don't think equity is about you taking a beating and it's just being totally disruptive. It's part of giving that student what they need, is finding out what they need, which is going to happen out, caring and loving that student enough to get the help that they need outside of your classroom.
Yeah. Can I say what I hear in your statement? It's really like a theme that's run through this conversation. Before you can even approach equity or social justice in the classroom, you really need to know your students and know your community. That seems to be an answer that I'm hearing from you, Crystal, a lot is, first of all, know your students, find out what's going on, ask the questions. If you don't ask the questions, you cannot understand where their perspective is. And the other thing that I'm taking away from this is that education doesn't happen in isolation. It's part of a community experience. And if you try to isolate it, you're going to run into problems because you can't know the community in isolation.
Also, something I heard, and I'll say it. It sounded like, well, let me ask Fatima in Spanish first. Fatima, sonaba como que la administración pensaba que estar en el aula significaba acceso a una educación de calidad. Solo estar ahí nomás.
Para ellos era como, incluso el mismo niño decía, yo no quiero venir a estudiar, pero era como, no, tenés que estar ahí adentro, y era como, era un poco complicado porque al final no le dabas como una buena educación a todos los demás niños, porque en cualquier momento sabías que había alguien que te iba a tirar algo por detrás, te iba a encerrar o iba a hacer lo que quería, ¿verdad? Sí. Pero para ellos era como importante que estuvieran dentro del salón de clase y no con ellos, o alguien más estuviera apoyándonos.
Ajá. Y en esto escucho ese como misconcepción de que solo para estar significa algo de calidad, y en vez de proveer el apoyo necesario para este estudiante, la administración estaba enfocando en solo que esté. no qué necesita de verdad para poder lograr acceder a una educación de calidad.
Sí, solo era como que él esté, total, es como un espacio más, así lo sentía yo.
So what I was saying was that what I was hearing too from that story is that it sounded like the administration was seeing it as quality. We want this child to have a quality education, so they just need to be present. But then this, like, that's not equity. You know, just being in the room does not mean that you have an equal opportunity to learn. And so that, you know, providing the support needed to be able to be successful is really different from just showing up in a space or just giving access to the space. And so that kind of comes back to that equality versus equity. And unfortunately, it sounds like the administration really was not helping the teachers, not supporting the teachers to provide equitable education for their students in that scenario.
Yes. Great point. And what a great way to sort of wrap things up. Thank you for that. So Crystal, I know I've talked to you for a couple of years about this. You've got to come on these trips. You got to come. You gotta come work with us. We'd love to have you.
I was thinking, post COVID, I'm going to apply for that Fulbright. I'm through tenure. I got to write a lot more before
Fulbright. Yeah, Fulbright is good. If you would do a sabbatical of any kind, we'd love to have you join us for part of that and do some writing from it.
Yeah, I would love to.
Come. Yeah. And also, I'm going to volunteer you, Crystal, and let me know if I'm making a mistake, and it's fine. But I'd love our team to be able to just connect with you. They should have your email because I sent it. If you have any questions, if anything, these things come up, Crystal is the expert. I mean, truly, she was the go-to person when I was in graduate school and still is when you have questions. So
yeah, if you have questions, reach out. If I don't have an answer, I can connect you someone with one. So please, it might, if you email me and I don't reply right away, don't take offense. My email becomes a black hole sometimes. But yeah, I'm definitely here as a resource. And I've enjoyed being in this space. So I just, commend you all on the work you're doing and just encourage you to continue to do the work. And, as a teacher, what I would do is every night, I would just kind of have this conversation with myself to say, did you do the best that you can do today? And if I could say yes, I went to bed. And there are a lot of times that I planted seeds with my students and I thought it didn't click. And then when I was in graduate school, I went to graduate school in the same town where I taught. And it was like 3 or 4 years later, my students like, Miss Hill, thank you so much. And just to see them grow. So just keep planting seeds. Even when it feels like it's not growing, you just never know. So just keep doing the work.
Thank you. I love that. Thank you, guys. All right. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks so much. Great to see everybody. Thanks, Crystal.
Thank you, Naomi, for coming. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.